Well, thanks for everybody for joining me. Before we get started, I kind of want to set the tone with playing a quick video that I think really captures a lot of the frustration that we have both in being healthy and figuring out what is healthy, but also in being a parent.
Oh, you're terrible.
Wait! Stop! Don't eat that food!
Who are you? What are you doing in our house?
I'm from the future. I'm here to warn you, don't eat that food.
Why not?
The eggs, they're full of cholesterol.
What?
Cholesterol, it clogs up your arteries. Eating even just one egg can dramatically increase your chance of heart attack. Don't eat eggs.
Oh my God, thank you.
You're welcome. Godspeed.
Well, I guess I better take those eggs.
Wait! Stop!
You're back!
Yeah, we were wrong about the eggs.
How?
Well, it turns out there's two types of cholesterol. There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and eggs actually have both. So you can eat eggs, but just don't eat the egg yolks. So stick with the egg whites.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Godspeed. Wait! We were wrong about the eggs.
Again?
Yeah, okay, so it turns out that the amount of cholesterol in a food doesn't actually affect how much cholesterol ends up in your blood. The eggs are probably fine. In fact, we sort of don't even know what cholesterol is. But the steak! You can't eat the steak!
Why not?
Turns out that red meat increases your chance of heart attack. You have to cut out red meat. So no steak!
Thank you.
Godspeed.
What? No steak, mister.
What?
Wait! We were wrong about the steak. It's the toast. Man was not meant to eat bread.
What do you mean man was not meant to eat bread?
Well, if you think about it, human beings should really only be eating what our Paleolithic ancestors ate. So, therefore, no bread, no toast.
How do you know what our Paleolithic ancestors ate?
Well, we just have to guess, right? I mean, we don't have any way of knowing. Whew. Okay, went back to the Paleolithic. They are not doing well. I don't know what we were thinking. If anything, we should all be eating a lot more bread. Jeez. So I guess just ignore everything I've said and exercise.
Exercise, okay.
Yeah, you guys could probably use it. You've been just sitting here for the last 35 years.
It's been 5 minutes.
Right. Time travel. All right, well, Godspeed. Turns out it's genetic. Doesn't matter whether you exercise or what you eat. I'm sorry I ruined your meal.
I need 10 minutes.
Do you want some eggs?
I'd love some. Can anyone relate about that and health information? Isn't it? That's exactly what it seems like. We're constantly getting all of this information, and then the next thing that we know is different. And isn't that also what it feels like to be a parent? Constantly, all of this stuff bombarding us this way, that way, this is the right way, that's the wrong way, right? So I was asked to talk a little bit about screen times. Okay, and this is definitely one of those hot button issues, and we all know the school rule, right? But what do you guys use screens for? Somebody throw something out. Entertainment. Anybody else? Anybody have a screen in their car? Yeah. Right. There's even refrigerators with screens nowadays. We've got our phones. Are any of us getting away from screens anytime soon? Are we going to have less screens in the future? Right. What do your kids use screen for? I know mine's babysitting for sure. Anybody else relate to that? Anybody else use screens? Kids use screens for different things? Just
We bond the screens sometimes.
bonding?
Doing
Yeah,
family movie nights and game nights and stuff.
totally. You don't want to give that up, right?
Because he does do, like, if I do put her in front of a screen, sometimes I'm like, I'd rather you kind of be learning or
Mhm.
something learning or
Right.
something like that.
Right. So there's education, right? Bonding. Anybody else?
Communication with family. We live out of state for
Yeah.
for my parents, and so we use it FaceTime for that type of stuff a lot.
Right. Connecting with our family members. We don't want to give that up, right? So no matter what I say today, is anybody really going to change the way they're using their screens? No, that's not the expectation today. Okay. So my name is Dr. Tad Scheck-Snyder. I am a chiropractor and I'm an addiction specialist. I specialize in a gentle form of chiropractic called network spinal. I'm a health and wellness expert and I'm a credentialed addictionologist, which is kind of weird for a chiropractor, right? And we're gonna get into that in just a minute. But what I'm really here to do today is to empower you to actually see stress in a very, very different way. And screen times are a stress. Just pretty much everything in life is stress. And despite popular belief, we actually cannot grow without stress. Everybody's trying to minimize it, but that's our growth motivation and inspiration. And that's what we need in order to grow. So if we know what the stress is and we know what it causes, then we get to keep the benefits and we can minimize the risks. And then we can help our kids actually grow and develop in a healthy way while keeping the benefits. So
There's new evidence that
finding the truth is very simple, okay? But applying that truth, that's a little bit more difficult. So I can't say this any better than this interview real quick. So we're just going to play this.
there's new evidence that excessive screen time early in life can change a developing brain. That might not be a bad thing. NPR's John Hamilton reports some scientists say the changes may help our brains cope with the fast-paced world.
A developing brain needs stimulation. So for a long time, parents were encouraged to give kids as many sensory experiences as possible. John Marino Ramirez of Seattle Children's Research Institute says that advice was based on a simple idea.
And the idea was basically the more you are exposed to sensory stimulation, the better you are cognitively.
Then studies began to suggest that children who spent too much time watching TV or playing video games were more likely to develop attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So scientists have been studying rats and mice to see how an excess of audiovisual stimulation changes brain circuits. At a press conference at the Society for Neuroscience meeting in San Diego, Ramirez described his latest study. It looked at young mice that spent 6 hours a day bombarded with a sound and light show meant to simulate screen time.
We found dramatic changes everywhere in the brain. So many of those changes suggest now that you have a brain that is wired up at a much more baseline excited level. You need much more sensory stimulation to get the attention.
Ramirez says the mice were also hyperactive and prone to risky behavior. He thinks that's because the mouse brain hasn't evolved to handle so much stimulation early in life. And he doubts the human brain has either.
The big question is, was our brain set up to be exposed to such a fast pace? If you think about nature, you would run in the savannah and you would maybe once in your lifetime meet a lion.
In a video game, you can meet a lion every few seconds. And Ramirez says when that happens early in life, the brain appears to become less sensitive to stimulation. So the mice didn't get stressed by the sound and light show. Overall, though, Ramirez thinks the changes are a bad thing. But Leah Krubitzer, an evolutionary biologist at the University of California, Davis, says for humans, it may not be so bad. She says our environment has changed a lot.
Less than 300 years ago, we had an industrial revolution, and today we're using mobile phones and we interact on a regular basis with machines. So the brain must have changed.
Krubitzer says maybe even in some useful ways.
There's a tendency to think of the good old days when you were a kid and, I didn't do that and I didn't have cell phones and I didn't have all this TV and look how great I turned out. And we kind of want our kids to go back to that.
Krubitzer says even if that were possible, it might not be a good idea. And the American Academy of Pediatrics seems to agree. A few weeks ago, it relaxed its long-standing rule against any screen time for kids under 2. Gina Trigiano, a brain researcher at Brandeis University, says that gives parents more discretion and more responsibility.
Parents have to be really aware of the fact that each kid is going to respond very, very differently to the same kinds of environments.
Trigiano says what's fine for one developing brain may be too much for another. John Hamilton, NPR News, San Diego.
So, hyperactivity, constant need for increased stimulation, and decreased ability to take in information, right? That's what it ultimately leads to if it's excess, which is the exact worst thing that we could deliver to Miss Arzate, is a kid in that state. Talk about making her job so much harder. And we are so lucky to have a school that really promotes the ability to learn, not just the information, but the actual ability to learn. This entire school is set up to really nourish those parts of our children's brains and bodies. And we don't want to counteract that. And I know the parents in this room, we're all a little bit different. We sent our kids here for a reason. So I know all of us want to cultivate these parts of our kids' brains and to recognize that, yes, screens will push them in this direction, but there's a lot that you could do to actually push their brains in the opposite direction, which means making them more capable of taking in information, making them more capable of being calm and relaxed, okay, making them more capable of actually being happy. That's the main reason that I got into addictionology. Not only a lot of my background and where my family what was going on in my family, but addictionology really is the science of happiness. It's the brain's ability to produce the state of happiness and well-being, and what happens whenever a brain cannot do that. So I figured, hey, as a chiropractor, what better thing to do than make people happy, right? That's job security right there. Nobody's going to get to the ultimate of happy. So in studying addictionology, I'm really into these parts of the brain that allow us to be happy, and they're very tied into actually our ability to learn. I am a health and wellness expert, which is very different in our society. In our society, we're actually taught that health is really just about avoiding a disease, right? If you just don't get sick, well, then you're healthy. That's actually not true. Right? This over here is kind of where our society is in our medical paradigm, right? Emergency medicine is the best medicine in the entire world. I wouldn't want to have surgery anywhere else. But our health statistics in this country suck, just like our education statistics suck also. And there's a reason, because they're linked. See, health is actually over here. Health is in the area of growth. Health is in the area of education. Health is in the area of wellness. It's not just finding the signs and symptoms of the lack of health. So if we know how to support our kids growing, we know how to support our kids developing the ability to be happy, we automatically move away from this end of the spectrum. So one of the things in addictionology that we study is what's called the reward cascade. And it's this very particular part of the brain that produces a cascade of neurochemistry that allows us to produce the end result, which is dopamine, which is the sensation of, I'm good, life is good, I'm going to go after what I want. Okay. And it starts off with serotonin, and serotonin is our at ease chemical. It's our pleasure chemical. Okay, enkephalins are pain reducing, and that actually is the neurochemistry of adventure. Like, I want to go out, I just want to go explore something. And then we have GABA, which is the neurochemistry of peace. Okay, there's one that's missed out on here, and that's oxytocin, and that's the love or the cuddle hormone. And then if all of those can interact correctly, we get down to dopamine. Okay, now Did you know there is not a single chemical that the body makes that makes us feel bad? There's no anxiety chemical, there's no fear chemical, there's no depression chemical, there's no actual pain chemical. Our body only makes things that make us feel good as a reward. And when we don't have those good things, we by default feel bad. So we have to grow our kids' abilities to feel good. We have to nourish and cultivate their brain's ability to actually produce this neurochemistry. So in healthcare, we have this saying, it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. You can't chase darkness out of the room. You cannot chase depression out of a body, but you can turn on the light. You can turn on the brain's ability to produce these feel-good chemicals. And that's what treating addiction really is all about. So let's talk a little bit about dopamine, because it's more than just reward. That's the very beginning of it, but it's also our motivation. Dopamine is what helps our brain turn off the fear pathways that say avoid, avoid, avoid. And it helps our brain shift into, I'm actually going to go out and get this. If you're going to be successful in society, you're going to have to learn a lot. You're going to have to do a lot. You're going to have to do a lot of things that don't feel good. You're going to have to feel good enough to be able to approach those things that are going to help you to get into that successful position. Dopamine is key for learning. This is one of the big problems with addicts. They do the same thing over and over again, and you're like, what are you doing? But they don't have the neurochemistry to actually recognize that what they're doing is not working and there could be something better, right? Dopamine is key for filtering information. The ability to focus is very dopamine driven, to take the information and say, this information is not important, right? This information is what I'm going to cue into. Our brains are processing trillions of bits of information per second. The conscious portion of our brain can only compute like less than 50. If we're a really healthy brain, there's a lot of filtering that has to go into being able to pay attention. Dopamine is also key to stress regulation, which is how do we use stress correctly, right? We're not going to be able to avoid it, but if we're regulated correctly, we're going to be able to use stress to grow from, rather than stress being something that's constantly putting us in a defense mode. And then finally, it's pattern recognition, right? It's the ability to recognize this is a problem. Oh, and this is the solution to the problem. That's a pattern, right? Who am I? That's a pattern. Where is my environment? Who's my family? How do I fit in? And then ultimately, what we all want for our kids is to be so successful that they stand out in life. And all of that has to do with pattern recognition, which is very dopamine driven. So if we do not have enough dopamine, we are going to develop what's called an affective disorder. This is what's called, another name for this is a reward deficiency syndrome or a behavior syndrome. It's not only addictions, but it's ADD, it's low self-esteem, it's Tourette syndrome, conduct disorders like excess anger, right? Antisocial personalities, excessive shyness, right? A lot of times we look at kids and we're like, oh, wow, they just must be a natural introvert. Kids don't fully have their personalities developed like adults. They have like little inklings of them. We can get a taste of their personality, but they're developing these portions of our brain, and they do that by social interactions. So a lot of times what we ascribe to a kid's personality, sadly, in today's society, is actually a trauma response. Okay, it's an inability to actually feel good and be at ease. Learning disorders, I grew up dyslexic. I was able to reverse that later on in my life, but learning disabilities, attention deficit, low self-esteem, this was my brain. I was born with a brain like this for multiple different reasons. And so knowing this, I know that I'm going to have to push my kids harder than ideally, because this is the brain that I kind of gave them, right? OCD, obsessiveness, hyperactive disorders, depression, anxiety, pretty much all mood disorders, even autistic syndrome. All of these are either caused or have a major tie to the brain's inability to utilize dopamine. And I don't want to scare you guys, I don't know if you can read this, but this is a major, major problem in our society. I really got the fire lit under me whenever I watched the documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma. Okay, we are raising an entire generation whose lifestyle is set up to push their brain into the direction of a functioning addict. And that's the world that they live in. So we have to know this so that we can start to push them in the opposite direction. So the third leading cause of disease of death for kids nowadays from the age of 5 to 19 is suicide. That's crazy. And that didn't
I will
come.
just say El Paso County is probably the highest in each. So if you haven't been affected yet,
My daughter had a friend.
yeah, it's been multiple and it's big. And
It is, and it's super sad, and there's a reason for it. Happy people, happy kids don't commit suicide, right? And we cannot medicate our way into happiness. That's not how things work, okay? Firearms over here, which is the leading cause. This is a combination of intentional, unintentional, and intentional includes homicide as well as suicide. Okay, happy kids don't take a gun and go kill other kids, right? Car accidents, there's a little more than going on than just happiness there. But then third leading cause over here is overdose. Again, happy kids don't experiment with drugs to the point where they're going to overdose. And you guys, the drugs that are out there now, fentanyl, where less than a grain of sugar can kill you, it's in almost everything. I don't know how you guys grew up, but when growing up, there's a lot of experimentation and you never really knew what was in it, but it was really safe. As much as drug experimentation can be, when I was growing up, it was safe. It is not safe nowadays. I mean, just the things that we take for granted on the streets now could kill you instantly, right? So we have to be aware of this, right? We have to do harm reduction. Yes, very important. But more than that, we have to help our kids feel so good, right? That they can come to us when they want to experiment, and they're experimenting with a lot of things that are going to be more beneficial, right? So how do we ideally get kids to produce dopamine on a regular basis, right? And the first part of this is co-regulation, okay? As babies, what happens is we are little sponges and our nervous system is picking up what's happening with the nervous system around it to the point that a mother and an infant's heart rate will sync up in less than 1/10 of a second whenever they come within 20 feet of each other. That's how sensitive these bodies are to what's happening around them. Okay, so what co-regulation is whenever a mother is putting her attention on this child, and this child is starting to pick up, wow, there is a lot of love coming this way. And whenever I babble and whenever I do this, oh my gosh, there's a response to that. Like there is this thing called a me, and there's this thing that's not a me that actually responds to me. It's this relationship, it's this intimacy based on oxytocin that sets up from day one our ability to be able to self-regulate and be happy. Later on, as we start to grow and develop, we send them off to school. The next thing is intrinsic reward. They have to be able to succeed. They have to be able to learn and then be told or shown through life that what they just learned is actually beneficial. They have to go experiment. They have to go explore. They have to go, wow, I did this and I got this positive reward from it. Miss Arzate is other than ourselves in our homes, is the biggest influence on our kids' ability to be happy in the future. Right? So we need to be showering her with gifts because what she's doing with our kids every single day is going, you did a good job. Oh my gosh, look how well you did, right? That sets up the brain to be able to be happy in the future. And then ultimately, what we want is we want environmental enhancement. Okay, environmental enhancement is not just going and joining Greenpeace, right? We have an internal environment. Okay, when we do something that is positive for our environment, okay, we have all of these receptor sites along our spinal cord and in our brain for the chemicals of hallucinogens, for the chemicals of marijuana, for the chemicals of ecstasy, right? All of these drugs that we take on the outside, our body actually produces chemicals of the same sort to stimulate our nervous system and say, good job, you did something positive for yourself, for your environment, for your species, right? And ultimately for evolution, okay? Life is not very nice to individuals and species that take more from their environment than they give. Life is about cooperation. Life is about ecosystems working together, right? So life has built into us this reward system that says, good job. You have moved life farther beyond just yourself, right? And this really starts over here in the teenage years. And that's why the teenagers are so focused on, do my friends like me? Am I doing a good job in getting that reward from my social environment, from my family environment, from my personal environment, from ultimately the work environment, right? So all of this is set up so that we can be happy, and productivity is linked to happiness. Not the only thing that makes us happy, because work is an addiction, probably a very underrated addiction. But what dysregulates our nervous system, okay, is whenever we don't get that connection super early on, when we don't get that connection in school, when we don't get that connection later on socially in our environment, then that causes our nervous system to stay in more of a defense response, to stay in more of an avoidance-based response. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I was not raised in an environment where the nervous systems around me were super regulated. We're super happy, we're super calm on a regular basis. I got some glimmers of that, but the vast majority of it was the exact opposite. Okay, so I just want you guys to know that what you're being asked, what you want to give your kids, is probably something that you were never given. That's a big ask, okay? And it's going to take a lot for us to move beyond the dysregulation that our nervous systems were trained into to be able to give that to the kids. Now, the good news is, as we start to move beyond that, as we start to heal from that, our kids are healing also. Our kids are picking that up. We're pulling their nervous systems along with us whenever we move into a regulated state so that they don't have to grow up with the stuff that limited us. Okay, so here's a question, since I've been talking about dopamine. Does screen time lower dopamine? Just raise your hand. If you think screen time lowers dopamine, raise your hand. Okay. If you think screen time raises dopamine, raise your hand. Ah, we got some smart people. Absolutely. Screen time does not lower dopamine. It actually is extremely stimulatory to it. But what it does is it disrupts the reward cascade. Okay. And it disrupts the reward cascade in a multitude of different ways. Number one is the feedback mechanism. Again, the dopamine cascade is set up to show us that we did a good job, right? If we're getting this blast of dopamine, but yet we didn't, in a sense, earn it, we didn't do anything, right? The feedback mechanism on our body is like, well, what is this? You got the dopamine, but nothing positive happened. Ah, you know what? I better lower the amount of dopamine that you get access to in the future, right? Because this is not really working. Something's off, right? There's an imbalance in stimulation, right? It's very stimulatory, okay? There's also an imbalance in the stimulation between certain parts of the brain that are linked to what we're picking up in the environment in our body. You've got all of this action going on in the screens, but yet our body's very, very calm, right? So there's this imbalance between what the body is saying and what the visual and the auditory cues are picking up, okay? Like I said, there's a depletion. You're squirting out all this dopamine. Well, it takes time for your body to make more, right? And if you're down regulating that, the body's not going to make as much. You have receptor destruction. That's the down regulation. So a lot of times what people are struggling with is not the inability to produce dopamine, but the little receptor sites that read how much dopamine that we have, that get tickled by the amount of, we don't have those. So we can have a flood of dopamine, but our brain might not be able to register and use it. Okay, we have an altered circadian rhythm. Okay, screens, for a multitude of reasons, throw off our sleep-wake cycle. They throw off how our body ebbs and flows with its ability to use energy and to store energy. It throws off our rhythm and growth and healing. Okay, it alters posture. Anybody watched your kids sitting there and watching screens? It's terrible for them. Okay, and it's a loss of body perception. They lose a sense of self, and therefore they can't pick up that connection because everything's going on in the screen, and yet there's no involvement from a self. And that's what their main job is right now, is to develop this sense of self so that they can take that in the world and be successful with it. So the factors in dopamine disruption are posture, and we're going to go through that in just a minute. Movement. The biggest stimulation in not only information, but also nutrition to the brain actually comes from the sensors inside of our joints. Movement is key for proper brain health. Light, like I said, the light that comes from our screens is very, very heavy in the blue spectrum, and that actually throws off the biological clock in our brain. Okay, and there's lots of information out there in the peer-reviewed journals about how screen time actually causes weight gain because it throws off our metabolism. Screen time interrupts our ability to sleep, which is where we do the majority of our healing. Right? So we're not sleeping good quality sleep when we're in front of screens all day long because the light in it throws off how our brain works. Hey, water. I'm going to go over this real quick because it's super complex and I could do a whole talk about this. But the electromagnetic fields of our technology change how the cells of our body use water molecules, and it creates a functional dehydration. So we can actually have enough water in our system, but our cells can't use the water that's there because the frequencies that are around us are pushing our body away from the frequency that allows us to use water, which then decreases our ability to produce energy. Anybody notice that? You've gone to a movie theater and you come out and you're like exhausted and you're foggy, right? Your body's ability to produce energy is disrupted by the electromagnetic fields of our technology. And again, this is not going anywhere anytime soon. So I don't want to scare you guys because there's management strategies, but these are stresses that we have to know about if we're going to apply those management strategies. The content that our kids watch is super important. I want you as an experiment to go back and watch one of the Care Bears episodes from the 80s. The pace of that show is drastically different than what our kids get today. The content in that show is drastically different than what they're going to get, even if it says that it's age appropriate. The speed of the content is extremely stressful for our kids, and the vast majority of even children's shows are delivering content that is far above where our kids' brains' development is. They're being exposed to problems and situations that they neurologically cannot process because they're not there developmentally.
And I will say, Dr. Pat, where this comes out, is in their play.
In their play,
In their
absolutely.
play, they resolve a lot of their confusion, a lot of what they've seen through their play. So it still comes out,
Absolutely.
but it comes out, it comes out through their play. I can tell kind of what they're watching, through their use of language, and their play.
And play, this is why I love Mountain Song so much. Play is one of the most rewarding ways to learn, and it's promoted here. And so if our kids are working things out in their play, but it's not connecting because it's beyond the level that they're supposed to be at, that causes a stress in their system, which then stops them from getting the reward that they need to get from play and resolving things at their level of development, right? So it just disrupts this whole process. And then finally is consistency. Okay, the timing at which our kids watch shows has a major impact on how their body functions and ends up in the reward cascade. And that's again why Mountain Song has this rule that says as long as there's school the next day, just stay off screens, right? And like, I'll be totally honest, there is some times that my kids don't follow those rules, right? So raise your hands if your kids are pretty lax in those rules. Okay, we got one. Got a couple honest ones. Okay, raise your hands if, you know, for the most part, you do follow the rules. And then on the weekends, it can kind of go a little bit crazy, right? Right? Now, do I have any screen Nazis in here that are just like, no? And even on the weekend, well, we got one. Yeah. Well, look, so you two have a good balance, right? My parent, my co-parent with, we have a good balance in that, right? We got screen Nazi and then we got right? So they're getting both ends, right? And I'm pretty sure that's how most households are. So again, there's no shame in this because our kids are not going to get a full balanced life, right? But they need to be set up so that they can recognize this and they're going to be able to handle the fact that life is not always ideal. Okay. So posture, just real quick. Posture affects and modulates every physiological function from breathing to hormonal control. The reason being is that our nervous system is mechanically tied to our skeleton. So the position of our skeleton directly affects how our nervous system works. That's why as a chiropractor, I'm focused on the spine, right? It's not just about getting people into good posture. Despite popular belief, chiropractors are actually focused on the nervous system. It's just the skeletal system is the closest that I can get to your nervous system without a knife. Right? So that's where my open door is. Okay, but it's much more than this. In the Journal of Clinical Psychology and Psychotherapy, it says basic research shows that the motor system, the movement system can strongly affect emotional processes. But what this means is the way that we hold our body affects directly how we feel. So much so that it says the findings of this study that are relative to minor changes in the motor system affect one of the best documented cognitive basis of depression. In other words, if we're going around holding a depressive state in our body, we are going to experience a depressive state of self and of the world. Okay. And again, look at our kids, how the position that they're in watching TV. One of the simplest things that you can do, right, is get your kids to lay on their stomachs, right, looking up at the screen so that their whole system is open and receptive while they're enjoying our technology rather than on the couch all hunched down. I'm like, that's super simple. Like we could all do that, right? And the next thing is get them to stand up, get them to move around, allow them to move around while they're watching a movie. That really helps their little bodies to be able to dissipate a lot of that stress, right? Encourage them to move around. They've got, you know, these wobble chairs that you're all sitting on. I have fit balls for my kids, right? So even if they are sitting down, their bodies have the ability to move and to shift to help to modulate their brain and be able to handle that stress that's coming in. Okay. The other thing is what's called the appropriateness principle, meaning the state of our body determines how we take in information. Okay. If we are in a defensive state, then all the information that we come in, if it's negative, we will experience it as more negative. And if it's positive, we will experience it as negative. Right? If we're in an open receptive state, right, and negative information comes in, we will experience as more positive, like something to grow from, right? If we're in an open receptive state and positive information comes in, we'll actually be able to experience it as positive. So the position of our body not only affects how we feel, but it also affects how we interpret the world around us and within us. Okay, but that appropriateness principle also applies to a lot more than just posture, which is the stimulation coming in appropriate for that little body? Is it appropriate for the situation? Is it appropriate for their level of development? The less appropriate it is, the more of a stress on the system it is. Okay. So since I've been talking about poor posture, right? Do you guys think I teach good posture in my practice? Do you think I teach my kids good posture? Do you think I'm like, hey, you need to make sure that your femur heads are directly up underneath your acetabulum and right up underneath the skull, right? No, because posture is a result of functionality. If I see poor posture, what that tells me is I'm seeing a challenge in functionality, right? I'm seeing a dysregulated nervous system whenever I see poor posture. I want to help regulate the nervous system, okay? And then posture, good posture, just feels better to have. If I ask any of you, why do you slouch? Because it's more comfortable. Why would I ask you to move away from comforts if I'm talking about dopamine and that reward, right? But what we want to do is we want to support our kids functioning so well that we never have to correct their posture. And we could use posture as a window into, well, what's happening with them emotionally? What's happening with them physically? What's happening with them mentally? Okay. So in order to talk about dysregulation, we have to talk about what regulation is, right? At all times, our nervous system is looking for three different things in order to be in a regulated, open, receptive growth state. It's looking at context, okay? Which means in a situation, why, what, how, right? Is it safe to engage? We're looking at choice. In this situation, do I have limitations, right? Is there too much freedom going on? No limitations. Where is that? Is it safe or is it dangerous? And finally, the last one is connection, right? What's happening in this moment and how's it impacting my connection with myself, my connection with my environment, my connection with the people around me, my connection with positive emotions, my connections, right? If any of these are a challenge for the nervous system to register, right, and to process, our bodies are going to go into a dysregulated state. Okay, so I want you to think of them sitting there watching a very intense movie by themselves, right? There's no connection. There's no connection to their body. There's no connection to the adults around them that are there to help them to feel safe, right? What are their choices? Their choices are totally up to what's being presented in front of them, right? And they're disconnected from their body, so they can't even recognize their own choices, even if they had to. And again, the context, a lot of this stuff, they're not going to be able to process at their age of development, right? So television and screens, the way that we use them a lot in our society, is extremely stressful and extremely dysregulating to our kids' nervous systems. We have to know that. We don't have to give it up, but we have to start by, before we do this, we're going to get into a regulated state, you and me together. And then after we're done, we're going to help them to reestablish a nice, healthy, regulated state. Okay. And then we can get the benefits of our technology, right? And we mitigate the risks. So as far as our nervous system goes, there's kind of three main parts to our nervous system, but the difference between growth and trauma, whenever we experience stress, is in the state that our nervous system is in before that stress comes in. This is one of the biggest challenges, especially in today's society, right? Because trauma is not a logical thing. You cannot rationalize someone's trauma. What's traumatic to me may be totally fine for you, right? Trauma is the response to a situation. It's not the actual situation itself. And the more dysregulated we are, the more trauma we're going to be able to experience, right? So when we have safety and a regulated nervous system, stress is going to produce growth. When we have danger and a regulated nervous system, stress is going to produce growth. But if we have dysregulation and anything, it's going to end up as trauma. Okay, we have a tremendous amount of trauma in our society, an unbelievable amount of trauma in our society. But we don't really have much danger, right? If we turn off the news and we actually look around, for the vast majority of the part, someone cuts you off in traffic and you got to move really quickly. We experience life-threatening danger maybe a couple times a year, in an intense year for most of us. Not everybody. Big military town, so and police force. So I'm not necessarily saying everybody, but for the majority of society, the trauma that we are carrying around has much more to do with dysregulation than it does actual danger. But in this, there's these different parts of our nervous system. Okay, and the higher part of our nervous system, if that's running the show, we're going to stay in a growth mode. Okay, if the lower part of our nervous system is running the show, we're going to experience a defense or a trauma. Okay, the highest part is what's called the ventral vagal system, and this is our social engagement. This is the I am system. Okay, sympathetic is I can, it's the gas pedal, get up and go, right? And then we have finally at the bottom dorsal vagal, which is I can't. Okay, now all of this is different when you look at the lens of safety versus not safety. Okay, when you're sleeping, you can't run a marathon, right? But that's not bad. That's exactly where you're supposed to be, right? So dorsal, I can't, is not bad as long as there's safety, because dorsal, when there's safety, is sleep, relaxation, meditation, bliss, right? Sympathetic, many times we think of this as kind of fight or flight, but that's only true if there's not safety. Right? If there is safety, then sympathetic portion of the nervous system is play, it's work, it's fun, it's dance, it's art, it's learning, it's everything that the Waldorf system and Mountain Song School gives to our kids on a regular basis. We need this portion of our nervous system, but it has to be in safety, right? And all of this is regulated ideally by our social engagement system. That's why we as parents are the keys to our kids being able to stay in a growth physiology rather than in a defense physiology. Okay, and the key to that is safety. And safety is not logical. Our bodies do not care if it makes sense to us why they are registering not safety. Our bodies are either in safety mode or they're not. And this is what I tell my patients all day long. This is not logical. This is physiological. If you know the signs and symptoms of not safety, you can help your body feel the safety, even if it doesn't make sense, even if there's no danger around you. Your body has to feel it. Otherwise, you are in a mental fantasy. And a lot of people in our day and age are running around in a mental fantasy. So how do you recognize this, right? So when the ventral vagal, when that top I am system is fully on board, these are the kids that we want to send to Miss Arzate so that she can do her job fully, right? We're going to get spontaneous sighs, right? These kids are going to be breathing deeply. It's not only relaxed sighs, but it's sighs of wonder. Oh, ah, right? The breath is very, very much involved with what they're experiencing, right? They're going to have soft muscles and their facial expressions are going to be very wide. They're going to vary, right? We're not going to just see a few of them. We're going to see the whole gamut of the facial expressions because everything is pliable and they're fully in the moment, right? We're going to see effortless smiles, okay? They'll be laughing about the dumbest stuff. Okay, we're going to be they will be able to comfortably express their needs and preferences. Now, this may be a pain in the butt to us, but it's actually a sign of health from our kids, whatever, like, I want this. I'm like, that's a great thing to want. We're not going to get that right now. But I so hear that you want that. Thank you for expressing that. I can see that you're in a really good place, right? There's a slow, steady pulse, okay? I may be the only one in the room that's wacky enough to measure my kid's pulse on a regular basis. They're gonna have clear thinking, right? Now, clear thinking is you can just see them processing, right? You can see them taking in the information and really like chewing on it and digesting on it and coming back with very interesting responses that are a lot of times are gonna kind of surprise you. They're gonna have calm emotions. They're not gonna stay there. It's not calm emotions all the time, but they'll be able to get there and then freak out because that's part of being a kid, right? They're going to have an upright posture, open chest, open belly, open pelvis. Again, not all the time because they're rolling around, but the majority of the time you see them moving along, you'll see that nice upright posture. As a matter of fact, for most of us, we could learn from our kids' posture. I teach in my practice. If you have a toddler, watch the way that toddler bends and lifts because they do it perfectly. Okay, they use eye contact. They're adaptable to change and routine and the environment. Things change up that are unexpected, right? They may ask you a question about it, but for the most part, they're like, okay, here we go, right? You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to tell a million and one questions. You don't have to constantly reassure. Okay, this is what healthy and resilient kids are like, okay? And again, most of us, we didn't grow up this way. So have some compassion about with yourself, right? That you are taking on the responsibility of giving to your kids something that you did not necessarily experience on a regular basis. That's a big ask, okay? If they're in sympathetic and they're in sympathetic and safety, right? They're running around playing. They're loud, they're boisterous, they're rolling around, right? Hard time being still. This is only whenever they need to be still, right? If they need to be still and they have a hard time being still, you're seeing a sympathetic, but it's in a not safety, okay? If their eyes are constantly wide and their pupils are dilated, okay? If their attention is all around the room, I'm not talking about like enjoying the room. They're like, oh, wow, that's cool. I'm talking about like constantly like darting around and they just can't seem to be settled and they're always looking and they're scanning and they're vigilant, okay? They jump or startle easily. Anybody in the room jump or startle easily on a regular basis? Yeah, we got some people that we know grew up with some unregulated nervous systems. Hey, they're hyper talkative. Hey, hyper talkative is not just asking a lot of questions. It's like asking the questions over and over again. And you're like, I just explained this to you. And then just like there's this vigilance that comes with their hyper talking. Okay. They need to know what's going on next, okay? One of the things that's part of the Waldorf curriculum is they're constantly telling the kids what's going to be coming along in the routine. The Waldorf system is really set up to help the nervous systems to settle into an open and receptive state. So I'm not just talking about telling your kids what's coming up. I'm talking about like their needs to know, and then you have to repeat it again and again and again. And you're like, I told you this, and yet why are you still asking me the same question? Or why are you asking me another iteration of the same question? We've already been over this, right? And they're unable to let it go. If there's an unexpected change, right, they're constantly into the like the why and the what, but this is blah, 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 right? Instead of just being an effortlessly flow with that, okay? And then finally you have the dorsal vagal system. Okay, and the dorsal vagal system, this is an extreme trauma response. Okay, and I measure this. I have a way of, and I have a system, and you can actually see it on a screen to measure what part of your nervous system are you in on a regular basis. Okay, the vast majority of adults that I measure are actually in the dorsal vagal state in not safety. That's how they live, and I get quite a few kids that are there also, which is super, super sad. But the kids, they're going to need this constant, intense stimulation. These are the kids, whenever they live in this state, that if you take their iPad or their phone away, it's like this big blow up and they just have this exploding because they're using that as their security, right? If you take away their security, their body actually starts to shut down as if it's being eaten by a predator. Okay? Blank face expressions, the deer in the headlights, you know, you look at them, lights are on, nobody's home. Okay. Do you see that? Are there certain days of the week that you see that a little bit more often than others? Yeah. Right. They don't talk unless they're fully comfortable. Right now, little kids, right? This is a little bit different. They need their parents to reassure them. I'm not necessarily talking about, I'm talking about our kids and older, right? If they just do not talk unless they know everybody in the room, they're totally comfortable with the situation, that's not a good sign, right? They're tired for no reason. They're like lethargic and their siblings are running around. They've had plenty of sleep, but you see them dragging and just kind of being, you know, just low energy. Okay. They have a high pain tolerance. You see them bumping into a whole bunch of stuff and you're like, shh. And it's like almost like they don't register because they're actually disembodied. They're disassociated. They can't take in that information about what's happening, right? They're uncoordinated. Now, I'm not talking about growth spurts, right? There's supposed to be a normal incoordination, but this kid is like incoordinated for a long time. Always dropping stuff, always bumping into corners, always having trouble figuring out where their body is in space. They seem to be paying attention, but they have no recall ability. Right? You're saying something and then they come back and they ask a question and you just said that exact same thing. You're talking to them, but it doesn't seem that they're registering. Okay. They're a loner. And again, there's a lot of kids that are running around being labeled as like an introvert personality. And in reality, they're just experiencing a trauma response. Okay. They seem spacey and they're super shy with new people and new places. Okay. Can anybody relate a lot of these within themselves? right? You yourself know, or you know adults that you could probably say, yeah, they register on this, right? This is a big problem in our society. Like more than half of the adults that come to see me live in this state. Okay. But good news, there's solutions, right? We don't have to just avoid technology. We cannot avoid our way into health. We cannot avoid our way into growing. We can't avoid our way into learning. But this does have to be a lifestyle. Okay. This is well known in all the scientific literature. The biggest cause of early death and disease in this society, according to the CDC, is lifestyle. The second leading cause of early death and disease is a medical intervention to our dumb lifestyle. We can't medicate our way into health. It just makes things more complicated, right? And if we're healthy, then we can use medicine to the best of its ability, right? If we're healthy and we have an emergency, we'll be able to recover from that. So this is not bashing, right? This is recognizing that we've got a major problem in our society, and that major problem stems with our lifestyle, right? The second one is modeling. Your kids follow you. That's just what they do, right? They're little sponges. They follow you, they mimic you, whether you know it or not. So we are constantly telling our kids what they need to be doing and not doing by how we live, okay? Co-regulation, we're going to go in a little bit more of that. But if our nervous systems are not in this open, receptive growth state, right, we are pulling our kids' nervous systems out of that state. Eye protection, okay? That light, right, it's a big deal. It's more of a big deal than most of us recognize, right? But there are glasses that you can get that block that specific portion of light so that you get the benefit of the technology and it's not frying you as much, okay? Balance in your life, right? Balance in your body, right? Like watching movies on one of those fitballs, practicing balance, but emotional balance, environmental balance, right? And then finally, content awareness. These are the places that you have the biggest ability to push your kids into the growth physiology, which remember, pulls them away from the addicted brain. Okay? Co-regulation. We learn to self-regulate our nervous systems by consistent experience with another calm, regulated nervous system. This is called co-regulation. The sad part is we cannot learn to self-regulate unless we've experienced co-regulation. So again, guys, I know what I'm asking here is a big ask because many of us did not grow up with this regulation. So we now have to take the responsibility of regulating ourselves at a much higher level than we ideally would because most of our bodies have grown into dysregulation. The biggest thing for co-regulation is breath. If there's the one thing that you can do is put your kids on your lap and you practice smooth, steady, deep breathing. You do that for long enough, you'll feel their little bodies relax. The second you feel that drop in relaxation, you got it. You just bounce them right up into that social engagement portion of the nervous system. Okay? A lot of times at that point, they'll also start talking to you a little bit more and kind of telling you what they're experiencing, what's going on, okay? The next thing is singing, humming, gargling, anything that stimulates this portion of the body, stimulates our vagus nerve, puts us up into that parasympathetic ventral vagal. Believe it or not, cold thermogenesis, right? It's not just cold exposure, but when you get cold, especially really cold, what's the first thing you do? You hold your breath. So the key to cold thermogenesis is actually practicing smooth regulation and relaxed while you're experiencing cold. This is one of the fastest ways to get our adult bodies if we do this on a regular basis, fastest ways to get us into a very regulated state regularly. Okay.
I take cold showers in the morning.
Yes, there you go. Awesome. And I bet you if I measured your system, I bet you we'd be able to see a nice balance in your system from that, okay? The oculocardiac response, now that's if you just lay on your back, right, and hold your eyes to one side, that actually signals to your body that what's in front of you is not a big threat. And if you do that after about a couple seconds or a minute or so, you'll notice you'll take a big deep breath, or you'll yawn, or you'll just have this spontaneous relaxation. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you my email at the end of this. If you email me, okay, I will send you an entire packet of information with basic exercises on how to push your own nervous system through regulating your vagus nerve into that upper level so that you can co-regulate. So again, watch for that email at the end. Okay, soothing touch, right? Touching the face, touching the chest, anything that we can do, especially with our kids, right? And they're always like, what are they doing? Like nuzzling up against us, right? And that's what they're doing. They're getting that part of their body. They're stimulating that portion of their nervous system to try to get that peace and relaxation and calm, okay? Affirming experiences is key. When our kids come up to us and they say, I'm scared, one of the worst things that we can do is say, there's nothing to be scared about. Okay? We haven't taken away their fear. We've actually left them in it. Now they're alone in it because they feel this thing, but yet there's no context for it. There's no connection in it. Their nervous system can't regulate. They can't understand why. So we have to engage with them in the level of connection, in the level of recognizing what's happening, naming it. Oh, yeah, I see you're afraid. Like, what's that feel like? Whenever I'm afraid, like it feels really tight right over here. What's that feel like for you? Right? Now they have somebody that's connecting with them that can actually help them to process this, right? Expressing that you see that they're afraid, right? Oh, man, I see that your shoulders are really tight right now. Like, what's going on? What are you feeling? What's happening? Right? And then letting them know that even though they feel this, even though they're seeing in it, even though we know what that feels like, they're safe. Reminding them that even though they have this fear, they are safe. Reminding them with their words, but also reminding them with your touch and your connection. Okay? So, what time is it?
6:20.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick exercise to show everybody if they are dysregulated. We'll do that at a different time. I'll move through this. Okay, so again, co-regulation, just teaching our kids, playing around, right? We can do this with them, getting them to touch themselves, face, chest, and then on the earlobes is another way to fire the vagus nerve that really helps to put us up into that. And we see this, right? What do we do when we're stressed? Oh, right? A lot of our stress responses are unconscious ways of pushing us into these higher functionalities, right? Okay, I want you to breathe with this because this is the pace of a regulated breath. Again, just consciously breathing this way when your kids are in the room, ideally on a regular basis, but especially when your kids in the room, sets their nervous systems up for success. Does everybody feel that? Everybody feel how it's like almost like the room's a little bit different now, right? It doesn't take much, but it does take conscious intention and focus because again, a lot of us, this is not our norm, right? The company for the glasses that I like the most is called Swanic, right? When you're looking for glasses, you want to make sure that the company has tested and blocks fully the range of 400 to 500 nanometers of light. Okay, you'll know this because if you put the glasses on, right, and blue looks gray, it blocks all of it. It's the blue light in our technology that's the most destructive to our circadian rhythm and to our metabolism. Right? So there's a lot of blue blocker glasses out there that block some of it. They're clear. You put the glasses on and you can see blue just fine. If you can see blue, it's not blocking blue. All right. So this company, and they're very inexpensive. I mean, you can spend hundreds of dollars out there if you really wanted to, but this company, they've got kids glasses for like 25 to 35 bucks. I mean, that way and if adults, if we watch TV at night, you really need to have a pair of this also. That's the worst time to get the stimulation is at nighttime. But again, I'm not going to give out my brain veg time. Like I need some of that downtime, right? So I got those glasses and that's what we do in the evening. Once we put the kids to bed, put on the glasses, let our brains veg, then head to bed, right? So again, we don't have to give it up. We just have to know what the damage is so we can mitigate it. Okay. Lastly, okay, iPads, phones, there's a lot on there that our kids can utilize, right? That can actually benefit them. My kids, they love the Colorado Springs Library app, Libby, right? The audio books on there. My kids ask me my kids don't ask me to watch movies, right? They ask me for audiobooks. And so what we do, especially when I'm sleeping in, right? The kids know they can go grab their audiobooks. And then while they're listening to stories, they can be doing art. They can be drawing. Their bodies can actually be engaged while they're getting that stimulation, right? And I don't hear a peep out of it. Whenever I go to conferences and I have to bring my kids with me, I bring some art and I bring audiobooks. And my kids are not the ones disrupting them like a lot of the other kids, even though the other kids are watching movies and screens and stuff like that, because my kids, they're engaging with their body while they're being totally entertained in a healthy, positive way, right?
They'll say joy has
Well, she has
It's
worked
good.
for it. For sure. I cannot tell you how many audiobooks we've gone through.
I've heard also podcast corners too, like learning,
Okay.
having them listen, and then
Okay.
they said same thing, like have
Yeah.
art for them to do, other things for them to keep busy with while they're listening to like podcasts, and there was like a list of like educational ones.
Oh yeah, I know.
There you
Like
go.
Amazon Music has a bunch of free
Mhm.
podcasts and stuff like that. Yeah,
Spotify,
absolutely.
yeah.
Spotify, yeah. So it's a lot that our kids can use technology, right? That doesn't have all of the negatives of them just sitting there staring at action happening on the screen.
Michelle, I'd be really careful with podcasts
Yeah.
because of the content.
Yeah,
no,
that's a big factor.
Because I would say most podcasts are not appropriate for that age. I mean, I don't really look much. I would, Sparkle Stories is excellent. Anything from the public library, but I would really stick with, content for younger kids because they don't need to be exposed to the older content. It's actually not helpful.
No, it was like ones like the fairy tales and different
Yeah.
things, like learning podcasts that like I filter everything she said.
Yeah. There's also lots of apps that you could get that do have like puzzles and learning games and stuff like that, right? So we don't have to give up the technology, but we do have to make sure that when we use it, especially for babysitting purposes, right, we're minimizing the risks and we're maximizing the benefits. Okay, so in conclusion, again, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because we're very different as parents, but it's a lifestyle choice, right? That's going to help our kids the most. And I know you guys do the vast majority of this. But you want to use the technology, you want to use the screens as a reward, not as a lifestyle. Okay, make them earn their screen time. Right? Help them to recognize that in the real world, there are consequences, right? If they don't do what they need to do in their job, they don't get the benefits. So use screen time, but use it to help them to learn how to earn what they want in life rather than just being entitled that life is going to give them everything that they want, because we got a big problem with that in our society right now. Okay. Know that it's a stress. Know how the stress affects them so that you can minimize the risks and you can maximize the benefits, right? Add and cultivate health. Health is something that we grow. Health is something that we nourish into our lives, into our bodies. Health is not created by avoiding a negative. It's creating by adding a positive. Balance it out. Right? Balance out what you do. I know for a lot of us, we live on screens on work, right? So if you work on a screen, please, for your kids' sake, don't let them come home and watch all of your entertainment be also on a screen. I know it's a big ask. We're all exhausted and tired. Okay, especially being on a screen, it literally depletes you. Okay, use protection. Right? Our moms always told us, use protection, those eyeglasses for all of us, right? And finally, and most importantly, okay, constant regulation of your nervous system. Not only will you be helping your kids, you will experience a better life through a healthy, happy, regulated nervous system. Our nervous system was what creates our experience of everything. Okay, if we're constantly putting our focus and regulating it, we get the best chance to have the best life, which if you want that for your kids, guess what? You have to show them that you have that also. It's more than just about them. Thank you guys so much. Hope I'm on time. I really appreciate you. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, curiosities, concerns, don't hesitate to text this number. Okay, the name of my business is Organic Living Chiropractic. My email is just organiclivingchiropractic@gmail.com. If you email me, okay, I will send you out this entire packet of all of these different regulating exercises that you can do. I did not have enough time to go over all of them. I just wanted you to know that they're out there, and then there's a lot that you can do, but I will give you all of that information if you'll just email. Okay. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, concerns, anger management issues? Like, I'll take them all.
When you were talking about breathing, is it better to breathe through your nose or breathe through your mouth?
Depends on what's going on.
Oh, okay.
Right? You're on the treadmill, like, great, breathe through your mouth. So breathing through your nose, okay, in a normal everyday situation is going to kind of anchor you into the present moment. Okay, breathing through your mouth is going to help you push outside of the present moment. Right? Whenever you're on the treadmill, you don't want to feel the present moment. You want to get it done. You want to get into that different moment, right? So breathing in the mouth and out the nose can actually help you to get into a very elevated, like, higher, what some people call like spiritual state, helps you to transcend the present moment, right? So there's a lot of different breathing techniques out there, and they all do different things physiologically. In general, my goal is to practice breathing in and out of my nose on a very, like most of the time, right? And everything else is just kind of an exception to that. Did that answer your question? Anybody else? Again, thank you. Yes.
You're a chiropractor.
Yes.
So do you do babies?
I do.
You do?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, gonna plug real quick. In my practice, any kid, if their parent is under care, they get adjusted for free. Because I very selfishly want my kids growing up in a world where there is a lot more healthy, happy people. And because our kids are developing, the tiny little shifts that we can make right now affects the entire rest of their life because they're growing. The state that their body is in now affects how they grow for the rest of their life. So it is vital that all kids make sure that there's nothing interfering with their ability to grow and to process and to be happy as early as possible. My kids got adjusted whenever they were a couple seconds old. It's one of the first things that happened. Now, not all kids need it. So just because a kid comes in doesn't mean that I'm going to adjust them. But if they need it, it's actually, in a sense, more important for a kid to get adjusted because it has major lifelong effects than it is for an adult. But it's more important for that kid to have adjusted adults around them. That's why kids are free with the adults, because a lot of times the majority of the issues that I deal with whenever I'm dealing with really problematic kids, they're parent issues. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate you. I hope that you got something out of this.